David grew up in Iowa. He is, I believe, a fourth, maybe fifth generation Kansan, he ran an organization called Thrive Allen County, which is an economic development organization that has really done some wonderful things in Iowa and the surrounding communities. And when Governor Kelly was elected as governor, she appointed him as Secretary of the Department of Commerce. And when our former Lieutenant Governor, Lynn Rogers, moved over to be State Treasurer, he was appointed as Lieutenant Governor. So he's got two duties here, and he's going to share with us what I think is some very encouraging news that's going on across Kansas in a time when there's not a whole lot of encouraging news. And he's also going to be talking about the new blueprint for the Kansas economic development that he has developed with the Kansas Department of Commerce. So, Lieutenant Governor, Secretary, we'll let you take it from here.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. And, you know, for those who don't know, Paul and I have been friends for a number of years. And it's a multi-generational relationship, though, because I'm a KU MPA, and Paul's dad, Ray, was one of my professors. And so just grateful for the relationship and for the opportunity to be here today. You know, one of our closest relationships really is with Lawrence and Douglas County. I was tallying up last year. So Governor and I came to Plasticon for a jobs announcement in Lawrence in the fall at some point. Governor and I were also at BTBC for the announcement of their phase 3 expansion. I see Adam Courtney's on the line here. I've been in Dave Cook's office a couple times on campus, and I see him here, and Chancellor, of course. We've got a great relationship there. Also outside of the city of Lawrence, we were over in Eudora back, I think maybe it was summer, for the announcement of Modern Manufacturing, which is setting up a new production facility there. And then I got to tour McFarland Aviation down in Baldwin. And so there's really so many good things going on in Douglas County. And it's my job as Secretary of Commerce to focus on the positives. And there really are so many good things going on here that it's not just a job, it's actually a joy to be able to talk about the rays of light in the Kansas economy, because they are considerable and they're real, and we're going to talk about some of those today. So if we could go ahead and start the slideshow, please. And I've got a pretty extensive deck here that's going to allow us, I hope, because we've got enough time to really dig in on where we're headed at the department, and where our successes have been, how we're going to work to leverage those successes, and then also where there are some headwinds that we've got to attack head on and aggressively. And so we'll talk about all of that.
Apologize, David, I accidentally closed it out, so I'm pulling it back.
Okay. Well, and just to kind of set the stage, and this will allow us to jump right in. So I'm going to give you an overview of the Department of Commerce. I think most of you are familiar with who we are and what we do, but I like to just give the quick explanation of how we're organized, and what our work has been in this past year, and what our deal pipeline looks like. So I'm excited about that. And yeah, so go ahead and go to slide 2, please. So, and then we're going to really dig deep on the Kansas framework for growth and talk about the 4 pillars around which this work is organized. And then we've got some time to also talk about legislative priorities. And at the end, I think we've got about 15 minutes for Q&A and discussion, which is frankly my favorite part of this. So next slide. The Department of Commerce is really a 3-legged stool. So we're organized around workforce development. So the Kansas Work system is part of our work, and really we'll talk about talent here in a few minutes. And that is at the core of all that we do, making sure that we've got good connections between job seekers and employers, and that talent is staying in the state. Second, I want to talk about community development, which is a new division that we've recently brought back to life under Governor Kelly's leadership. And that is because of a strong belief in the importance of quality of life being central to economic development. And you know, there are very few places in the state of Kansas that better reflect that than Lawrence, which has such a high quality of life that has driven growth and high quality growth in one of our state's largest cities. And then business development, which is what most people, if they're familiar with the Department of Commerce, it's what they think of us doing. So this is our team that's in the state that works to help existing Kansas businesses to grow. And it's our recruiters who are around the country. And I'm very proud that we're back again on the East Coast with a terrific recruiter. We've got in the Chicago region, Great Lakes region, we've got somebody there again. We're back on the West Coast as well with a strong presence. We're in Dallas and we're in Kansas City and Springfield, Missouri. And so we've got top-notch economic development professionals who are going out every day and making the case for Kansas as the nation's best place to live, work, visit, and invest. And having those boots on the ground in market has been key to so many of our successes. Just as one example down the road in Wyandotte County, the Urban Outfitters new distribution center that came from our New York recruiter who had a relationship with a site consultant that was tied in with Urban Outfitters, and we won that battle, which involves states of Ohio and Texas and Missouri. We brought those jobs, nearly 2,000 of them, as well as $440 million of new capital investment to Kansas. And so that's just an example of how important it is to have that presence in our domestic markets. And then last, international. So this is a part of state government that was entirely dismantled under the last administration. We've got our international team back up and running. We have a presence in Mexico, which is the state's largest trading partner. And we've also got a terrific new director, Jeff Willis, who is leading that team and getting us rebuilt so that we can focus on opening up new export markets for Kansas companies and ag producers, as well as attracting more foreign direct investment into the state, whether we're talking about Kubota, which has a huge presence at the intermodal in Edgerton and which announced a few months ago that they're going to expand their manufacturing in North America by doing it in Salina, or whether we're talking about like Schwann's, which had the single largest economic development project in the state last year with over $600 million that's being invested in a food processing facility, also in Salina, coincidentally. So good things happening, but business development is really our bread and butter, but it is intertwined with community development and workforce. It's not a layer cake, it's a marble cake. So next slide. Last year, we set a record in the history of the state of Kansas for the amount of new capital investment that businesses did in our state. We topped $2.5 billion of capital investment in spite of COVID, in spite of a global recession, in spite of just a lot of uncertainty in the world. That's really, I think, for two reasons. Number one, as I just described, we've got our team back on its feet and we've got that presence and we're going out hustling for business every day. But number two, the companies and the sectors that are growing in this period are the ones that are really aligned with where Kansas has natural strengths. So whether we're talking about food processing or advanced manufacturing or logistics and distribution, that's where Kansas is strong. And we were fortunate and we were good and we were lucky in the sense that we were ready as a state when COVID hit to be able to seize on the opportunities that were being created in this otherwise really tragic and terrible time for our country. And so that's why we set that record and we're really proud of it. And you can see the distribution of projects by sectors there. Next slide. So what we have in our deal pipeline, and this is one of the things I'm most excited and proud about, is that we have 353, it may be 357 now, I believe, economic development projects. And when I say project, a way to think of this is it's like a lead, but it's not a remote lead. This is where we know the type of company, we know what they need in terms of a site or a building, we know how many people they want to hire. And so we've got over 350 of those types of projects that are in our deal pipeline right now. To put that in comparison, when Governor Kelly and I took over 2 years ago last month, we had about 140 projects in the pipeline. So we're going out and we're sourcing more deals, and we're doing a good job of converting those leads into actual jobs and actual capital investment. So you can see what this year looks like. I might note that aerospace is relatively small, as you might expect. That sector has been just decimated by COVID. And in our state, we started to feel the pain prior to COVID with the grounding of the 737 MAX, which we're pleased is being recertified, and not just in the United States, but in Europe as well. And that's good news, but it's going to take a while before aviation gets back entirely on its feet. But we think that when it does, and it's not a question of if, it's a question of when, we're going to be really well positioned to make sure that Kansas maintains its status as the world's aviation leader. So next slide. I'll talk to you about the Kansas Framework for Growth, which is the state's first new economic development strategic plan that we've done since 1986. And Governor Kelly, alongside Governors Carlin and Hayden, last week unveiled the framework, which you can read in its entirety at kansasgrowth.com. And we're really excited about this, and I'm going to walk you through now the different elements of the framework, starting first with the data. So next slide. You'll see that, in everything that we do at Commerce, I really try to make sure that we are focused on the numbers, focused on the data, and that we're analyzing things from an intellectual place, as opposed to what feels good or what we might have historically done. And so we did a deep dive on the state's data, and you can see there are some pretty significant headwinds that our economy is facing. If you look at GDP growth as it relates to our peer states, as well as to the country as a whole, over the last decade, we grew at about half the rate of the national average. We have a tremendous challenge that is related to outmigration, particularly of our young people. And this is not necessarily a new trend, but it is a worsening trend. We also have a high percentage of our workforce whose jobs are at risk of being lost due to automation. And we're starting to see this in Western Kansas in particular, where there are massive investments that are being made, which we appreciate by companies, but they're investing in automation. And at some point, that is going to create significant workforce challenges for us if we don't choose to seize what could be an opportunity and get workers trained for the jobs of tomorrow. I would also add that we've got a decline in our working age population as a whole. And so you combine those talent factors with the outmigration issue, and it's a significant area of concern for us. But we also have some important tailwinds, which are that the economic sectors where we're strong, we're really strong. We have core assets, whether we're talking about aviation, whether we're talking about agriculture, whether we're talking animal health, and so on, where we are naturally well positioned, and we think we're going to continue to be strong. So we have areas upon which we can build. We also, and this is particularly important to Governor Kelly as our state's education governor, we are proud of our K-12 and our higher ed system, and that's for good reason. It's not just because those are our kids. It's because we rank really well nationally, talking data again, in terms of the percentage of our population which is well educated, in terms of how we rank academically. We do very well. But again, going back to the point up above, which I'm going to continue to harp on, we've got to keep our kids in the state. We got to do a better job of not exporting our greatest product, our educated young people, at a deficit to other states. And that's what's happening right now. Next slide. So we've organized the framework around target sectors, which you can see there, none of which should come as a surprise to you. We've also got strategic pillars, which is where I'm going to dig in here with you today. And those pillars are intertwined throughout each of them, throughout those target sectors. And then we've got at the core economic regions. And so an example of that would be the Metal Coalition with Manhattan, Emporia, Topeka, Lawrence. That's an example of an economic region that has come together because it makes sense to work together and because there are strategic advantages to working together. And we're going to be pushing more models like Metal around the state because frankly, that's how our competitors are doing it. And they're doing it better than we are when we've got this hyper fragmented system of, we've got 105 counties and we probably have, I don't know, 90 or 93 or 95 different kind of economic plans on how folks want to grow. That's not efficient, it's not strategic, and we've got to have more of a focus on regional economic development. Next slide. So starting first with the pillar around talent. What you've got here is, this is about people. This is about making sure that we've got the folks that are skilled up, not just for today, but for tomorrow, that we've got a focused effort on retaining these people, whether it's about recent grads or whether it's about folks that may be farther along in their career and they've seen their current job disappear and they may choose to, they could choose to go to another state for the same kind of job somewhere else, or they can choose to stay in the state and get trained up into those jobs of tomorrow. We've got to make sure that we're doing a better job at my department of recruiting jobs that line up with the skills that we have. So for example, 32% of, I believe I've got this right, 32% of our college grads have a bachelor's degree in the state, but only 24% of the jobs that exist in the state of Kansas require a bachelor's degree or higher. So there is a mismatch there. And so that means we got to do a better job of attracting those white collar jobs in that case, that we've got the talent to be able to support. And then again, on the issue of retention of graduates. So this is something that Chancellor and I and Vice Chancellor Cook and frankly, all the university presidents and I have had conversations about, which is annual targets on retention of grads in the state. And this is something that has to be a partnership. So we got to make sure that at Commerce, we are roping in the universities around our business recruitment efforts so that they understand, like for example, that 353 project pipeline that we've got right now. If the universities are part of this process with us on the recruitment side, then they're going to have better information to be able to guide opportunities for their students and graduates that are in the state. And so we're working on that on this end to make sure that we're being a good partner. And And I've been really grateful to have the relationship with Chancellor Girard and with Vice Chancellor Cook around these issues, as well as with the whole team at BTBC. So Laverne Epp and folks have just been awesome as we look to create those jobs for tomorrow and grow and incubate and grow these high-tech companies in our state and keep them here once they are ready to fly the nest. We want to make sure they don't fly the nest to Austin or to Omaha or to Denver, but instead that they stay right here in the state and flourish here. So that's what the talent pillar is all about. Innovation pillar, and this is another example of the marble cake idea, where innovation really runs through all of those target sectors that we're talking about. So we've got to have greater innovation, let's say, in food and agriculture. So that's about UAS systems, so drones to help manage farms and agricultural products. It's about precision ag. It's about evolving and making certain that we're staying at the cutting edge of new technologies. And so you'll see that run throughout all of the target sectors and everything that we do. At its core, though, we also have to have an ecosystem in this state that is first welcoming and enthusiastic about entrepreneurs who have new ideas, and that second can help get them plugged into the supports that they need to take these ideas that are in their head and commercialize them, turn them into businesses, turn them into jobs. And that's where our university partners come in clearly. And then we've also got to make sure that we've got access to capital for these innovators, and that they've got all the pieces that they need, whether it's developing a prototype in partnership with the university and then being able to seamlessly move on the financing side to be able to get this business launched. Whatever it looks like, that's the ecosystem that we have to have in the state, and that frankly we don't have enough of. BTBC, KU doing a great job here, but we need more of this across the state. And so you can see all the points there. One that I'm particularly excited about, and this is modeled after some work that is being done in Michigan and other states, is establishing front doors at each of the universities in the state, so that the person who might right now be tinkering in her garage with a new idea, and they want to figure out, okay, how do I get that prototype made? They know that we call the business front door at KU or at Pittsburgh State or wherever it might be, and that's a way to plug into the tremendous research and development capabilities that we have in our state universities. And so we got to be plugged in at Commerce. We've got to have SBA. We've got to have the Small Business Development Centers. We've got to have Network Kansas. All these partners that can wrap around in a supportive way these entrepreneurs and help them take idea and turn it into jobs. Next slide. So community assets. At the end of the day, this is about the power of places. And we've got a cool picture of Mass Street, which, when I think of the power of places, Mass Street is one of those places that really reflects the best of our state. It uses historic assets, architecture, good urban design, funky shops, great places to eat. Mass Street is the kind of place that we take company CEOs to when they're visiting the state. So there are community assets like this around the state, and we've got to make sure that we're leveraging them and that we're strengthening them. We've also got to make sure that in places where there's the right kind of infrastructure, whether we're talking about highways, whether we're talking about particularly fast broadband, whether we're talking about rail, that we really are using and leveraging those assets to get everything we possibly can out of it. Down in El Dorado, their strategy is around marketing the water assets that they have to companies that may be in the Western United States who need easier access to water. So this is about playing to our strengths and making sure that we are really promoting vitality and just great places. Next slide. So the last pillar is around policy. And kind of the simple way to think about this is, to me, this is about the tools it takes to grow our state's economy. Whether we're talking about economic development incentives, whether we're talking about regulations that can help or hinder in certain areas, and also, you think about a budget. Budgets are the ultimate reflection of priorities and policies. Where you put your money matters. I'm grateful to Governor Kelly that she has prioritized economic development along with education and infrastructure in this year's budget. And so where there were a lot of cuts that had to be made across state government, she kept the Department of Commerce whole, which is key to our ongoing rebuilding, but also reflects her belief that ultimately the way we strengthen the state's economy long-term is by making investments today that are going to pay off in the days to come. So policy is critically important. And I want to also stress here that transparency matters a lot. We launched about a year and a half ago a transparency database where any Kansan can look up at kansascommerce.gov by their community or by the name of a company and find out what state incentives a company received when they came to Kansas. And that has, at the time, that was kind of alarming to a lot of economic development professionals. But what we found is that it's been very helpful because people oftentimes don't understand, the connection between the incentives we make and how that turns into jobs, how that turns into new opportunities in communities. And so I think more information is better. And so we're committed to transparency in this administration, and particularly as it relates to our economic development programs. Next slide. So you can see those target sectors, and I want to stress here again, none of this is radical. These are areas where we're already strong. It's about being stronger, though, and having that spirit of innovation in each of these sectors so that we can increase and enhance our market share and grow more of the types of jobs that are a good fit for our state. But I would also add that we particularly need to double down on professional and technical services. So on more white-collar jobs in Kansas, and we've done actually pretty well in this area. But I think there's a lot more opportunity, as evidenced by those numbers I gave you earlier about percentage of grads with a bachelor's degree in the state at over 30%, but you've got just 24% of the jobs that require that. So that's an opportunity for us. Next slide. So I kind of already made this point about regional collaboration, and I just would double down on that and say first thank you to Steve Kelly and Bonnie and the folks at the chamber who have been committed to metal and that whole spirit of regionalism. It does make a difference, and we want to take what you've done and spread it across the state, and we'll be hopefully announcing more on that soon to come. Next slide. So that kind of wraps up on the framework. Again, you can see the whole plan at kansasgrowth.com, and I encourage you to check that out. So let me talk a little bit about our legislative priorities. So we have 10 bills this year, and 10 bills is probably more than the Department of Commerce has had in the last 5 years combined, I would guess. We've got a, I forgot to shout out Hugh on metal. I'm sorry, Hugh, the main guy. So, but I want to talk a little bit about where we are with the legislature and what we've got coming down the pike, and we actually feel pretty good about it. So there are 3 reintroductions of bills from the last session: STAR bonds, where we're seeking a 5-year extension of that program, and the opportunity to be able to use STAR bonds to attract headquarters companies to the state. So that's about white collar jobs. And we're hopeful that we're going to have, you know, it'll always be an uphill battle on STAR bonds, but it's such a powerful tool. We've made some important modifications around transparency and accountability there. And so I think it's going to be a much better program, and that there are going to be a lot of new opportunities that come if we can get HB 2529 passed. We also have the angel investor program. So talking about those you know, high growth, innovation-based companies, the angel investor tax credit is a powerful tool for supporting those companies. It's up for a 5-year extension as well, and we've had a fair hearing so far. We're gearing up, unfortunately, for what we think is going to be a little bit of a fight on the floor about this, but I'm hopeful that at the end of the day, the legislature will see the merit and the wisdom of continuing this program. And then KIT and KER and its connection to HPIP. So KIT and KER are Kansas Industrial Training and Kansas Industrial Retraining. They're the 2 training programs that we have at the Department of Commerce. They have been used for years as a mechanism for companies to be able to access the HPIP program, which is a tax credit program. The problem is that most of the companies that need HPIP already do their own training, and they don't actually need KIT and KER, but it is an easy way to be able to access HPIP. And so what they do is apply for incentives in order to access incentives, other incentives. And that's not efficient. It doesn't make sense. And what we've done is we've drained the state's training programs. And so we want to decouple the training requirement on HPIP from that and have a more efficient incentive, and particularly protect those dollars, those training dollars that companies need. So new legislation in 2021, also on our HPIP tax credit program. We have learned through conversations that the governor and I have had one-on-one with company CEOs over the last year that HPIP is increasingly less competitive as a tool. And that's because these companies that are doing large CapEx projects in the state, often they simply don't have sufficient Kansas tax liability to be able to redeem these credits. So we make them a really nice offer on HPIP when we're recruiting them, but that's of no value if you can't actually use those credits, which companies are seeing more and more. And so we have this bill which will permit companies to transfer up to 50% of their unused HPIP credits. And this is an important part of keeping us competitive nationally and globally, and we're hopeful that we can get this through the legislature. We also have a minority women and service disabled veteran bill, which would require state agencies like mine to annually set targets around procuring goods and services from businesses in these categories. One of the findings in the framework for growth is that we have a lower rate of startups in the state than our competitor states, and we have fewer startups that actually make it past that initial stage to become a full-fledged company. We need to do a better job there, and we particularly need to do a better job with women-owned businesses, businesses that are owned by people of color, and service-disabled veterans in particular. And so that's where we're coming from with this bill, and we'll see how it goes. Rural Housing Incentive District wouldn't be relevant in Lawrence, but it would be relevant in smaller communities around Lawrence. And what this would do is permit rural communities to use the RHID program, which is like a TIF to develop housing. They would use it to be able to do second story and third story lofts on Main Street, for example. Right now, the only way you can use RHID is if you want to build new infrastructure, say to add a new cul-de-sac on the edge of town. We want to be able to drive some investment into the downtown Main Street areas of rural communities where, frankly, it's going to be more efficient because you've already got the infrastructure there and so forth. So we think this is a smart growth move that can really pay some dividends in rural communities across the state. R&D tax credits and SBIR and STTR matching grant. So another area where the state as a whole has not done well is on accessing SBIR dollars from the federal government. These are monies which are targeted to entrepreneurs who have the next great idea. And we think that if we can provide some matching grants as some seed capital to help these smaller companies, that we can increase the utilization rate of the SBIR program. I think we're 48th out of the 50 states in utilization of that. And then R&D tax credits, again, this is about supporting high growth, innovation companies in our state, the kind that are being incubated and grown at BTBC and elsewhere. And then the other two are kind of rural related, so I think I'll skip over those in the interest of time. So I think that's my last slide. So I would be happy to take questions, comments, critiques. You can hit me with whatever you'd like. So thanks for listening.
If folks have questions, please just put them in the chat box here, and I'm going to post them to Lieutenant Governor. We've got a couple already here in the pipeline here, and the first one relates to high-speed internet, rural broadband, which has really been something that has been talked about for a long time, and I know there's some things that are going on, especially with the CARES Act money related to this, and really vital to economic development in rural areas. Can you talk a little bit about what's been going on at the state level with that, and kind of where you see the future with that?
Yeah, so really for the last 20 years, there's been a lot of talk about what are we going to do about broadband? And I'm really excited that in 2020, we were able to translate that talk and that, I don't know, a lot of angst and a lot of concern. We translated that into action with using almost $50 million of CARES Act money to do new broadband infrastructure around the state. And we have targeted those areas that were unserved completely. And it's pretty remarkable when you overlay the map of these unserved areas prior to these investments with the map that shows where the investments were made. We really made a lot of areas that had no coverage disappear. And an example of that is out in Southwest Kansas, Meade County. I had Representative Boyd Orr from Meade in my office a couple of weeks ago, and he showed me the speed test he had done on his at his office that morning, and he was running 300 times faster that day than he was 6 weeks before they were able to flip the switch on the new investments that have been made there. And so broadband is absolutely essential to the state's economic growth. It's as important as any other type of infrastructure, as roads, as running water, as electricity. Broadband is right up there. And so I'm particularly pleased that the transportation bill includes $5 million for each of the next 3 years, and then $10 million in the following 7 to continue to build out broadband infrastructure in the state. So we got $13 million of requests for that $5 million this year. We're in the process of scoring those applications, and we'll be announcing those investments this year, or excuse me, this month. Maybe it'll be the 1st of March. So we're excited about that, and we're going to continue to push to eliminate all unserved areas in the state first, and then to improve speeds in those areas that are underserved.
Okay, our next question has to do with research and development tax credits, and you touched on this just a little bit. The person that posed this question mentioned that research and development tax credits were removed back in 2012 and then partially restored in 2017. But I think they were restored for C corporations, and not all corporate entities, of course, are a C corporation. And could you maybe talk a little bit about whether other corporate entities may be able to take advantage of R&D tax credits, and maybe just talk a little bit about the R&D tax credit issue as a whole?
Yeah, great question. I was going too fast when I was talking on legislation. So R&D tax credits, this is a 6.5% credit. And what our bill would do is make it available to S corps, to LLCs, and all types of corporate structures. This was something that the Brownback tax bill impacted, and what we're trying to do is just take it back to where it was before the Brownback tax plan. And so this is one of those things that should have been cleaned up a long time ago, and so we're cleaning that up this year.
Okay. Our next question comes from Patrick Schmitz, who is the president of Burt Nash Community Mental Health Center in Lawrence, which is a treasured member of our community. And this is probably a little bit more of a comment, but you may want to just talk a little bit about the importance of mental health and having healthy and strong communities. He wanted to encourage you to take a look at House Bill 2160, which is a bill that, from what I understand, has Kansas become part of a Federal Excellence in Mental Health Act, which something that he thinks is really good for our state to do and will help a lot of the community mental health centers. So that's a comment, but if you want to add anything to that, just on the long lines of mental health, that would be terrific.
You know, I will check that out, and I certainly know the tremendous work that Burt Nash has done for many years. My previous role at Thrive Allen County was you know, we were both an economic development organization and an organization that was focused on healthcare access in that very rural community. And so we worked a lot on mental health related issues, Southeast Kansas Mental Health Center there. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't add the importance of expanding Medicaid in our state and what that means for providers. We've already lost $4.5 billion in federal money by being now one of only 12 states that hasn't expanded Medicaid. And so I would anticipate that everybody on this call knows the importance of Medicaid expansion, but I just want to, you know, we're going to keep pushing until we get this thing done. And so we're grateful for all your support there. But I will check out HB 2160 and see what I can learn there.
Our next question is about agriculture and local food systems. We have a food policy council of Douglas County that you may or may not be aware of that is doing a lot of really good things in the community. And the question really relates to what can we do to help elevate agriculture and food systems really as part of economic development for the state?
That's a good, tough question. Let me start here. With the CARES Act money, one of the areas that we prioritized was helping small businesses that are engaged in food processing. So for example, the meat locker that you see in many towns around the state. As COVID hit and we saw food shortages in supermarkets, what you found was people started to rediscover their local butcher. And so what we were able to do was make some investments with this money that came from the feds in helping that local meat locker buy new equipment, do a small scale expansion, all of which helps to support a more robust local food system so that we're not just dependent upon the big box stores, but that we've got the big box stores and we've got other options. And so that would be one example of where we've tried to be thoughtful about making long-term investments into smaller businesses that are food processing. And I'm really proud of the work that Department of Ag and Department of Commerce did jointly on that. I think also we have some opportunities around specialty crops in the state. So, you think about there are now some wineries in the state, including in Douglas County. Senator Holland has a winery down by Baldwin. So we've got opportunities like that which are related to ag tourism. We have I'm trying to think of some other specialty growers that are in the state. Sunflowers. Are you trying to think? Is it Herb who does the big crop art outside of Lawrence often? Those are examples of where we're taking our agricultural assets and where we can turn them into tourist opportunities that bring new money to the state. And, frankly, at a time when we particularly need to support our hospitality industry, I think there are some opportunities to leverage off of food and ag there. So I don't know if that fully answers the question, but it's a start maybe.
I've got two more questions here and then we'll wrap up. And I'm going to save the best for last because I know you're going to have a lot to say about that one. The president has issued an executive order about Made in America products. And this is something that's been talked about for a little while. And the question really relates to is this something that Kansas can take advantage of?
I'm not familiar with the EO, so let me take a look at it. And certainly we are committed to supporting our tribal communities and particularly trying to create more economic opportunities in partnership with our tribal communities. And so let me take a look at that and see what I can find out.
Okay, here's our last question. I think this is a very timely question, given what occurred in the legislature yesterday, and those of you who read the paper this morning probably saw what happened in the Kansas Senate. And it's a question from Ken Haidt, who's a CPA with Mize Hauser. Are there any tax policy changes that are being considered that really are going to be growth oriented in your mind? And I might just couple that with looking at tax policy as a whole and the state budget. Obviously in Lawrence, what happens at the University of Kansas has a substantial effect on our economy, and we're very concerned about what the budget looks like for the university, and if there's another big hole that's blown in the budget, how that could impact higher education and a lot of other things. But talk a little bit about tax policy that's growth oriented and the larger question of sort of how that affects the state budget.
I'd start by saying the most growth oriented tax policy you can have is stability. And what we've seen in the state is that when we do these experiments, like what happened a number of years ago, and we wreck our fiscal house, and we have to make cuts to education, where we have to make cuts to infrastructure, make cuts to social and human services. That has a profoundly negative impact on businesses that are focused on talent. That workers are people. People want to be in places with good schools, with good parks, with good streets, and all of that costs money. And what's frustrating is to see where we seem not, some folks seem not to have learned the lessons of the not so distant past about what wild swings in tax policy can do to not just wreck the state budget and by extension the budgets of local governments and higher ed and K-12, but also to destabilize the business community in our state, which wants stability, which wants predictability, which wants good services. And so to me, in the fiscal environment that we have where COVID has really complicated a lot of things, the most pro-growth policy you can have is one that supports the three-legged stool of income tax, property tax, and sales tax as the primary supports of state government, and that doesn't get out of whack on any of those three legs. And so we'll see what happens, but wild swings, wild experiments are bad for business.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for a very insightful presentation. There were a number of comments in the chat box. I just want to share two that came from our CEO, Bonnie Lowe, and our board chair, Kirsten Flory, just thanking you for taking the time today and your working relationship with the Lawrence Chamber and our community. We're very, very grateful, and we look forward to having many more discussions with you in the future.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. And again, want to thank you and Bonnie and Steve and everybody at the Chamber, everybody who's been on this call. I see a lot of familiar faces, and I'm grateful for all those relationships that we have. If we can be of service in any way, don't hesitate to reach out. So thanks, everybody. Stay warm.